All right. Awesome. We are live. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's live stream. For those who haven't tuned in the past, my name is Charlie, and I'm an associate at both sides of the camera company. I'm also the software expert and one of the educators here. And this week's topic for the live stream, I want to dive into Adobe Lightroom's auto masking. Now, Adobe for years has always incorporated masking to some degree. There is linear gradients, there's radial gradients, brush tools, luminosity masks. There's a whole slew that you can work with. Within the last year to a year and a half now, they've began incorporating auto masks into their program. And at first, I was overwhelmed by it. I've been using Lightroom now for 6 years, and then all of a sudden, this complete overhaul to masking was enforced, and it threw me for a loop. At first, I was almost debating leaving Lightroom. I was so overwhelmed by it where I wasn't sure if this is what I wanted. But once I sat down with it for a bit and I actually kind of understood each tool and the capabilities of each tool, I've never loved Lightroom more. There's a lot to take in with it, but I'm hoping that in the next 10 or so minutes, I can kind of walk you guys through some of the techniques that I've found to be extremely useful, how you can incorporate it into your workflow, and see basically how masks can take your images and your editing process to the next level. So I want to dive in right now, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to share my screen here. And I want to start off by talking about this image here. And the reason I want to talk about this image is because there is a bit of a dynamic when it comes to different attributes that this photo has. There's a well-exposed sky. There's a bit of an underexposed foreground, but there's also a subject in here. So there's a lot of things that I with to demonstrate it. So when you're in Lightroom, and we're using Lightroom Classic for this, this is what I'll always be using when I'm live streaming is Lightroom Classic. If I want to go ahead and I want to make any adjustments to the image overall, in the Develop tab, all of my adjustments are here. Now, any adjustment that I make here is going to be what's called a global adjustment. So if I were to boost my exposure, one full stop, basically what happens is the entire image is going to go ahead and be exposed an additional stop. Same thing goes for anything here. So if I boost my highlights, globally, it's going to affect the entire image with boosting highlights. Now, what I really want to do, though, is I do want to boost in the exposure, but I also don't want to lose that blue sky that I had when I originally exposed this image. So how can I go ahead and boost that, but keep that sky under control? What I want to do here is I will actually kind of boost up my exposure a full stop. But then in my little tab up here, at the very end, there's this little circle with a set of marching ants around it. If I press on this, I now am in my mask window or my mask tab. Up here at the top, then I'm given 3 options. Add new mask for a subject, sky, or background. And then in addition, there's objects, brush, linear, radial, and then different variations of ranges. Now for this one though, I want to go ahead and I want to start with selecting my sky. And this is where Lightroom's auto masking has become so robust and so powerful when it comes to not only enhancing your workflow, but also speeding it up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to simply press on add new mask for sky. And automatically now Lightroom is going to go ahead and it is going to select my sky. It's going to look at the image and say, where's the sky of this image? And it's going to make that mask for me. So anything in green here is what's selected right now. Anything that's black and white or not green, areas that are not going to be affected. Now I can go ahead and I have my basic adjustment panel right here where I can make adjustments locally to that area that's selected. So what I can go do is I can actually take my exposure and I can bring my exposure right back that full stop, and it's going to look exactly like it was when we originally had the image. So I can go through and I can adjust my exposure. I can go ahead and I can adjust my highlights. I can go through and do shadows, whites, blacks, clarity, dehaze. Basically anything in the basic panel, I can go ahead and I can adjust locally to the sky. This one for those who are shooting landscapes, or this one for those who are shooting portraits like outdoors, this is going to be your best friend because you can then bring back a lot of the detail in the sky if you were shooting for, let's say, your subject, which is like a person in your image, or there was a certain attribute in your foreground that you really wanted to stand out and have all that detail. So I can go ahead right now and I can actually bring back down my sky and bring that back. Now, the next thing though is I'm noticing that yes, the subject, which is me, is standing right here, but I'm not getting as much detail as I'd like to be. I'd like myself to stand out a little bit more detail with myself in there. So I'm going to go back now and I'm going to go back into my marching ant circle. And you can see now my mask 1 is saved right here. And this little icon is where my selection has been made. If I want to, I can press on these little dots and I can choose to rename it. So I can call this my sky adjustment. And now I know that looking at that, that's the adjustment I've made to my sky. Let's say I want to go in and jump in and actually adjust my subject now. I can go do create new mask. And again, here's all my options. Select sky, select subject, background. They also have select people. So if you're doing like a family session or you're shooting, a group of people at once, you can also do select people. And it's going to select everyone in the shot. It's not going to choose one person. But because there's one, I'm just going to do select subject. So if I go ahead and do that, you can see this little cute icon right here appearing over me. And again, if I zoom in, you can see it selected me beautifully. So I'm going to zoom back out now. And if I want to toggle the green display and I want to kind of just see my image the way it looks right now, I can press O on my keyboard. So if I press O, give it a moment here, I still have that mask selected, but now I'm not seeing the green. For my sake, though, I typically leave mine on because I can see the exact selection that's been made and I don't need to worry about it affecting areas that I don't want it to. If I'm zooming in like this, all I'm doing is I'm going over to my box right here, my navigator, and I'm just clicking on my subject right here and it's zooming in for me. So I can see my mask a little bit better. Again, now I can take it and I can boost up my exposure if I want to. I can bring up my shadows. If I want to bring down the highlights a bit and recover a bit more of my shirt that I was wearing, I can do that. If I want to bring down the exposure and I want to kind of silhouette myself more, I can do that. But I'd like to have a bit more detail. So I'm just going to bring up the exposure a bit. And all that I'm doing right now, it takes very little time. It's, as you can see, I'm just selecting the masks and then I'm making minor little adjustments here. I can go through now and I can either double click and rename this to, me. And now I know that my master mask right here is selected for me. So if I want to make any adjustments to that, I can do that. I can jump in here and I can make my adjustments as such. Now, let's say I want to focus on my foreground right here. I don't want to focus on the sky above. I want to focus on the opposite, essentially. A technique that I've learned that has been extremely beneficial when it comes to balancing out the dynamic light in a foreground as well as the sky and keeping it uniform is making a mask for my sky like I did here. I can basically do that again. I can make as many masks as I want with an auto selection. So as you can see here now, what I did was I selected the sky again, but I want to do the opposite right now. I want to go and I want to select everything down here and make adjustments to there. So on the right here, there's this little button that says invert. If I turn on invert, what it's going to do is it's going to take what the mask selected and it's going to flip it. So now I have a mask of my foreground. So if I want to go ahead and I want to brighten up this area of the canyon here, I can go in and I can increase my shadows and I can have a lot more detail of that canyon. I can also go ahead and I can bring down my exposure if I want to. If I want to add more contrast, I can do it as such that way. Personally, one of my editing styles is I like to decrease my clarity so I can make a bit more of a soft looking canyon, so I can bring down my clarity a bit. If I want to add a bit more haze or kind of a misty look to it, I can bring my dehaze back a bit. And that definitely helps with bringing out shadows here on the edge. So now I'm looking at it and I'm saying in just 3 masks, and that was only the only global adjustment I made was doing 1 grand exposure of +1 stop. We went from this to this. And you can see here, now I have a lot more detail in myself. The canyon is brightened up, but my sky looks the same. So I'm very pleased already with how this is looking. But let's say now I want to go ahead and I want to make an adjustment to this area right here on the side. Their auto masks are great. I can continue doing that. But let's say I want to go ahead and I want to paint in a certain area. I can jump down to their little brush icon right here. And it gives me this nice little icon now instead of my mouse that is this inner circle and then an outer circle. The inner circle is the area where my opacity is going to be 100%. That area of the image, that area is going to fully be affected. The outer circle, though, is going to be an area where it feathers out. It's going to be softer. So I don't want to have this super strong paint. I want to soften it up. I can select auto mask here so it kind of looks for edges. And now if I go in and I let my MacBook kind of catch up with me, I can go ahead and I can paint in any area that I want to have boosted. So I can jump in right here. I can grab the edge right here. And you can see it brings me right up to the edge of the shadow. So I want to actually darken out that area in the bottom, basically to make my own dynamic vignette. So again, I'll let my MacBook kind of catch up with me here, kind of add that little area that I missed right here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to darken that area up a little bit. Be patient for a moment. Taking its sweet time, which is a-okay. Come on, Mac. Thank you. Cool. As you do more of this, as you add more masks, sometimes it can slow down because it's calculating out so much. But if you have a powerful enough machine, there's really no limit to how many masks you can do. So now that it's kind of registered all of that, once I can actually jump up to my exposure, I'm going to just slightly start bringing down my exposure on this area here. And you'll see here now what it's going to do is it's going to darken out that edge of this rock formation right here. Once Lightroom decides to catch up with me. There we go. Cool. So all that did now is it kind of evened out those rocks. It's not going to be an overpowering bright area. And again, that was by just applying a simple brush, edging out the edge of that shadow, applying where it actually looks for the edge. And it helps me where I'm not going into areas that I don't want to affect. So now I can look at it and I can again toggle on and look at what my before was. And I can toggle after, and you can see in just using masks, I went from this to this. A lot more detail to look at, a lot more detail in the subject, areas that I can dynamically create my own vignettes, areas that I can dynamically control the shadows and the highlights, all while maintaining the beautiful sky that I had that day. So now I want to kind of jump back here, and I basically just want to implore anyone that has used Lightroom in the past to dive again into it and take a look at their auto masks. It is something that within the last month, again, they overhauled and added in their select objects and their select people, and it has truly changed the game for any editing whatsoever. AI is becoming kind of the new norm with a lot of editing, so you can incorporate that AI with your own creative style and apply it to your masks and take your images to the next level. I can't think of an image that I've edited within the last 2 to 3 years that hasn't had at least one mask. And a lot of images you will see will have some masking involved to it. So if you haven't looked at masks in the past, I implore you to do so. If you have any questions on them, feel free to stop in either of the stores. I will be at one of them. Feel free also to contact us in the comments for Facebook or YouTube. Ask questions there. I'll be checking those in the coming days, and I'll be answering any questions that I can. So for those who have tuned in, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Till then, happy shooting.